The grand hall of the alien palace was full of noise and lights. Everyone had come to celebrate the peace between humans and the alien kingdom of Zevlon. Colorful flags waved in the air, music played, and nobles wore bright clothes with long feathers and shining gems. In the center stood a man, tall, silent, and strong. His name was Riven, a human soldier, a commander who had fought for peace for many years. He wore his old battle armor, scratched and marked, full of memories and scars, but his back was straight, his eyes calm and his heart heavy. At the top of the hall, on a shining platform, stood Princess Zaya, the leader of Zevlon. She was beautiful, powerful, and cold. She looked down at Riven with sharp eyes, a small smile on her lips. "This human," she said, her voice echoing in the hall. "He says he has a heart." People laughed. Soft at first, then louder. "A heart?" she continued, turning her head slightly. "How strange for something made of dirt and blood." Riven didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked up at her, his eyes deep, hurt but controlled. He had once trusted her, even cared for her. She had once held his hand in the dark during war, whispered words that felt warm and real. But now she laughed at him in front of all. The nobles clapped, thinking it was just a joke, just fun, just words, but to Riven they were knives. He slowly raised his hands to his helmet. The crowd became quiet. One by one, he removed each piece of his armor. First the helmet, then the shoulder guards, then the chest plate. Each metal piece hit the marble floor with a loud sound. Clang, clang, clang. He stood there in simple clothes. No protection, no walls, just himself. His face was calm, but his eyes were full of something powerful. He looked at Zaya one last time, then turned around and walked away. No words, no anger, no fight, just silence. The great doors opened as he left, the sound of his footsteps fading away. No one stopped him, no one dared. Even the laughter had died. Princess Zaya stood still, her smile fading, her fingers tightening around her throne's armrest. She had won, hadn't she? She had power, she had pride, she had her people, but something felt wrong. Riven's back was straight even as he walked away in pain. He had given everything for her kingdom, for peace, for her. And she had broken him in front of everyone. With just a few cold words far away from the palace, Riven walked into the wild lands beyond the city. His armor left behind, his heart still beating but heavy. He remembered the first time he met Zaya. She was not cruel then, not proud. She was just a girl with eyes full of fire and fear. He had saved her from death, fought beside her, shared stories under alien stars. He thought she saw him, not just as a human, but as a person. Now he knew better. He walked until the palace lights were gone, until there was only wind and sand. He sat by an old tree, the sky above full of silent moons, and for the first time in many years, Riven let his tears fall, not for war, not for pain, but for love that never was. And in the empty dark he made a silent promise. Never again, no more armor, no more battles, no more chasing a heart that was never his. He would disappear, become a shadow, a ghost, a name people would whisper but never see. Back in the palace, Zaya sat alone in her grand room. The music was still playing, but her heart was not dancing. She looked at the empty place where Riven had stood, and for a moment she wondered, did she really win? Or did she lose something far more precious? Outside, the wind carried his name into the stars. Riven, the man who walked away without a word, and everyone who had laughed would one day remember. He was the only one who didn't need armor to be strong. The night was quiet when Riven left the city of Zevlon. The lights of the palace were far behind him, shining faintly like dying stars. He walked alone through the cold wind, his boots pressing into the red sand. Without his armor, he looked smaller, but his steps were steady. He didn't look back, not even once. Every step took him farther from the place that had humiliated him, and from the woman who had broken something deep inside him. But Riven wasn't always this silent shadow. Years ago, he had been a young soldier from Earth, full of hope and foolish courage. When humans first landed on Zevlon, the two races were enemies fighting for the same sky. That's when Riven met her, Princess Zaya, the one who would one day mock him in front of thousands back then. She was just a frightened girl hiding in the ruins after an explosion. Her guards dead, her kingdom burning. He found her by chance, bleeding, her golden eyes full of fear. Instead of capturing her, he carried her to safety, his own blood dripping onto the ground as they escaped the fire. That night, in a broken temple under alien stars, she asked him, "Why did you save me?" He smiled softly and said, "Because no one deserves to die alone, For a long time, they stayed hidden together, talking through the nights. She told him about her world, the floating gardens, the crystal rivers, the twin suns that never set. He told her about Earth, its blue skies, oceans, and the quiet sound of rain. Slowly, she began to smile again, and he began to believe in peace when the war ended. Riven stayed on Zevlon as a bridge between their worlds. He became her protector, her closest ally. Some said even her heart, but hearts are strange things. They can be warm one day and turn cold the next. As peace grew, so did pride among her people. They whispered that Zaya didn't need a human beside her, that it was shameful to care for one of them, and in the end the pressure changed her. She began to treat Riven differently, no longer as a friend, but as a tool, a weapon that once saved her. He tried to ignore it, tried to believe she was just afraid, but deep inside, he felt the distance growing like a storm, until the day she mocked him and the storm finally broke. Now walking through the night, Riven's memories felt heavier than any armor he had ever worn. He reached the edge of the wastelands. A place of old machines and silent towers. There he stopped, built a small campfire and sat beside it. His hands shaking slightly, he stared into the flames, watching the shapes of the past dance in the smoke. He remembered her laughter, the way her hand once rested on his arm, gentle and real, and then the sound of that same voice, sharp and cruel, calling him weak in front of all. He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and whispered. Never again. Days passed, and he stayed in the ruins. He repaired broken machines, helped lost travelers, and hunted small creatures for food. He spoke little, but his actions spoke louder than words. People began to talk about a mysterious human who lived alone in the wastelands. Some said he was a fallen knight. Others said he was a ghost guarding old secrets. But to those he helped, he was simply the man with no armor. Back in the city, Zaya tried to continue as if nothing had happened. Her council praised her, her people bowed. Her soldiers sang songs of victory. But when she stood before the mirror, she saw a stranger looking back. At night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the echo of his footsteps leaving the hall, and that silence, so deep, so final, haunted her more than any insult could. She remembered his eyes, calm even when she tried to destroy him. She remembered how he once said, "A heart is not weakness, it's what keeps us human." And now she wondered if maybe she was the one without a heart. Her thoughts grew heavier with each passing day. The palace felt empty, the celebrations hollow. She missed the sound of his armor echoing in the corridors, the quiet strength that made her feel safe one night. She called her guard captain and whispered, "Find him." The captain looked at her in surprise. "Your Highness, the human?" "Yes," she said softly. "Bring me news of Riven." The guard hesitated, then bowed and left. As the door closed, Zaya looked out at the stars beyond her window. Somewhere out there, she knew he was watching the same sky, but from a different world of silence. And deep inside, for the first time in her proud life, the Princess of Zevlon felt small because she realized something far more painful than guilt. She hadn't just lost a soldier. She had lost the only person who ever saw her not as a ruler, but as a soul, and far away in the ruins. Riven looked up at the stars too. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He just whispered one name, Zaya, before the wind carried it away. The palace of Zevlon still shined under the twin suns. Guards still marched, music still played, and nobles still laughed in golden halls. But something had changed, something quiet and deep. Like a crack in a mirror no one wanted to see. The human, Riven, was gone. And though no one said it loudly, everyone felt it. The hallways seemed colder now. Even under the warm sunlight, the guards walked slower. The servants whispered more, and Princess Zaya, she smiled less. She sat on her throne every morning, dressed in shining robes, surrounded by advisors, but her eyes often drifted toward the grand door, as if expecting someone to enter, someone tall wearing battle-worn armor, silent but strong, but he never came. During meetings, her mind wandered. Her generals spoke of border attacks, small but growing. The peace she thought was solid now trembled like glass. Without Riven, her enemies grew brave again. "He kept the wild clans back," one commander said softly. "They feared him more than our fleets." She stayed quiet, but the words struck her heart like a blade. In the evening, she walked alone in the royal gardens. The air smelled of sweet fire blooms, but the scent reminded her of something else. Riven's old coat. Dusty but warm. Once he had sat beside her on the marble bench, watching the sky in silence. Now only wind sat beside her, cold and empty. Whispers started to rise in the palace. Some said Riven had returned to Earth. Others believed he wandered the ruins like a ghost. But one thing was clear. Without him, the balance was shifting, and Zaya felt it not as a queen, but as a woman who had made a terrible mistake. She began to look through old records, battle reports, peace plans, letters, anything he had left behind. She found one message he had once written but never sent. It was short, written in strong yet gentle handwriting. Even if I die tomorrow, I will not regret staying beside you, because for once in my life I felt seen. Her hands trembled as she read the words. She remembered the night he wrote it, after a battle, when she was too tired to speak and he just sat by her, quietly cleaning her wounds. She had forgotten that moment until now. Guilt, heavy and sharp, grew in her chest. She walked to the armory and stood before his armor stand. Now empty. His armor had been taken away after he left, but the space remained, dusty, untouched, sacred. One of the older guards stepped beside her, his voice low. We all thought he was just a soldier. She turned to look at him. But now that he's gone, the guard continued, we see he was more. He was the heart in this cold machine. Zaya said nothing, but her fingers tightened at her side. For the first time, she realized something terrible. In all her power, all her pride, she had forgotten what it meant to care. Not just rule, not just lead, but care. And now it might be too late. The next day, she called for her scoutmaster, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a loyal heart. I need you to find someone, Zaya said, her voice softer than usual. Who? The scout asked, already knowing the answer. Riven, she said. I don't need him to come back, I just need to know if he's alive. The scout nodded once, then disappeared into the shadows. Days passed, then a week, then two. Zaya waited, trying to focus on her duties, but her thoughts always returned to the man in rusted armor. Finally, the scout returned, her face dusty, her armor scratched. I found him, she said. Zaya's heart jumped, though her face stayed calm. Where? In the ruins beyond the wastes, the scout replied. He helps travelers, fixes broken tech, lives in silence. Does he speak? Zaya asked quietly. Only when needed, the scout said. They call him the Silent Guardian. Zaya looked out the window at the golden sky. The wind touched her cheek, and she remembered his voice, gentle and warm, calling her name like it meant something. A storm of feelings moved inside her. Shame, longing, fear, and something deeper. She whispered to herself. I thought I broke him, then she turned, her voice stronger. Prepare a small ship, she ordered. No guards, no flags. The scout looked up, surprised. You're going yourself? Zaya nodded. I will not send words to fix what I shattered with my own voice, and that night, under the cover of stars, the Queen of Zevlon left her palace not as a ruler, but as a woman searching for the one heart she didn't understand until it was gone. Far across the wastelands, Riven stood near his small fire, watching sparks rise into the sky. He did not know she was coming. But something in the wind changed, soft and strange, as if the past had taken a breath, and the void he had left behind in the palace had finally decided to follow. The ruins beyond Zevlon were older than any book could describe. Massive stone towers leaned like dying trees, half swallowed by red dust and crawling vines. Broken machines lay scattered like skeletons of a forgotten age, humming softly in their sleep. And in the middle of this silence lived a man once feared by armies, now forgotten by kings. Riven, the human warrior who once stood beside royalty, had become something else, something quieter, heavier, older. He built a shelter from broken ship parts and steel ribs of old walkers. His roof was made from a fallen wing, his walls patched with metal plates inside. There was nothing grand, just fire, tools, and silence. He never spoke unless someone needed help. And still travelers came, a lost merchant, bleeding from a wild animal's bite, a mother with 2 children running from raiders, an old man with a broken leg and no hope left. Riven helped them all, no questions, no payment, no name. They began to call him the Silent Guardian, a myth with kind hands and sad eyes. He would disappear into the mist before they could even thank him. But deep inside, Riven was still broken. He worked by day and sat by the fire at night, staring at the flames as if they could burn away memory. He never laughed, never dreamed. The voice of Princess Zaya still echoed in his mind, the way she mocked his heart in front of all. That one moment had shattered something no armor could protect. And though his body still moved, his soul had stopped one evening. After fixing a shattered hoverbike for a young rebel girl, Riven sat beneath a twisted tower. Above him the sky turned violet, 2 moons rising slowly like watchful eyes. He ran his fingers along the edge of his old helmet, now cracked and rusted. He hadn't worn it since the day he walked away from the palace, still he kept it close. Not for battle, but as a reminder. Nearby a soft sound broke the quiet. Small footsteps, careful ones. He turned, expecting a scavenger or a lost wanderer. Instead, a child stepped forward. A little alien boy, barely tall enough to reach Riven's knee. His clothes were torn, his eyes wide with fear. "Please," the boy whispered. "My sister is hurt." Riven stood without a word, grabbed his medkit and followed the boy through the ruins. They reached a collapsed bunker where a young girl, barely breathing, lay on the cold ground. She had fallen from a broken ledge, her leg twisted badly. Riven knelt, checked her pulse, then carefully lifted her in his arms. She cried softly, but his voice, when it came, was like a warm blanket. "You're safe now," he said, only 3 words. But they made the boy cry in relief. He carried her back, cleaned her wounds, wrapped her leg and gave them food. The children stayed 2 nights, and when they left, they looked at him like he was a god. But he did not smile. After they were gone, he sat by the fire again. His eyes colder than before. He had become a guardian. Yes, but he had stopped being human back in the city. Zaya's ship sliced through the clouds toward the wastelands. She wore no crown, no robe, only a cloak and simple boots. She had read the scout's report a dozen times, but her heart still twisted with doubt. What would she say to him? Would he even look at her, and did she deserve forgiveness? Her fingers brushed the small box in her bag, a gift she had once planned to give him long ago. A silver star pendant, shaped like the one he had drawn for her under the temple ruins, back when she still remembered how to smile with him. Not at him, she had forgotten it for years, but now she held it like it was made of glass. The ship landed in silence, kicking up dust as it settled near the edge of the ruins. Zaya stepped out slowly, the wind pulling at her cloak, and for a moment she saw him. Riven stood in the distance, helping an old machine lift a cart stuck in the mud. He looked older somehow, not in age but in weight, as if every step he took carried 10 behind it. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him quietly, heart racing, guilt crawling up her spine. This was not the man she had laughed at in front of her court. This was not the warrior in armor, standing tall with pride. This was something far stronger, a man who had been broken, and still chose to help others. She took 1 step forward, then another, but stopped when Riven finally turned his head. Their eyes met across the silence and the past, and in that single moment, neither of them moved, because sometimes, even between 2 people who once stood close, the distance becomes a mountain, and it takes more than words to climb it. The wind was dry and silent when Zaya stepped into the heart of the ruins. Her boots crunched against ancient stone and dust as she moved slowly forward. No guards walked beside her. No banners waved above her head. She came not as a queen, but as someone carrying regret like a heavy cloak on her shoulders. Ahead of her stood the man she had come to find, Riven, the one who had once stood at her side like a mountain. Now he stood beside a dying tree, feeding wood into a quiet fire. He didn't turn when she approached, not out of anger, but out of something colder, disconnection. She stopped a few steps away, unsure if she should speak. The air between them was thick, heavy with the things they never said. "I came alone," she said softly, her voice barely above the wind. Riven said nothing, only placed another piece of wood into the flames. "I had to see you," she continued, her hands trembling slightly. Still no answer, no movement. The silence wrapped around her like chains, pulling her deeper into the weight of her guilt. "You saved me," she whispered again and again, "and I turned your heart into a weapon for the crowd." Riven finally looked up, his face lit by firelight. His eyes calm but unreadable, he stared at her, not with hate, not with love, but with a quiet kind of distance that hurt more than any words could. "You didn't just walk away that day," she said, her voice cracking. "You took something with you." His voice came slow, dry and low. "I took back what was mine." Her breath caught. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't understand what I was doing to you." "You did," he said simply. "You just didn't care." The words hit her like ice, and she stumbled back a step. "But I care now," she said quickly, desperate to close the space between them. "I came to say I'm sorry." Riven stood, towering over her, not in anger, but in truth. Sorry doesn't unbreak bones, he said. Or fix hearts. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small box. Her fingers opened it slowly, revealing the silver star pendant. The night you showed me that drawing, I laughed, she said. But I kept it. I had this made for you. I don't need gifts, Riven said. His voice flat. I know, she replied, placing the box gently on a stone beside him. But maybe I do. The fire crackled softly between them. The only sound for a long while. I never knew how strong you were, she said. Until you left. Riven turned his back to her. Looking out at the edge of the ruins beyond them, the wasteland stretched for miles, open, empty and free. Out here, he said, people need help. Not speeches, and you give it, she replied, without expecting anything in return. That's how it should be, he said. She stepped closer again. Then let me stay. He looked at her slowly, with tired eyes. Why? Because I need to remember what it feels like to serve someone. Not just command, she said. I need to feel small. To learn, he didn't answer, just walked back to the fire, sitting down again. You can stay the night, he said finally. But not as a queen. Her eyes softened. I stopped being that the moment I lost you. The moons began to rise above them, casting long shadows across the stones. Zaya sat across from him, the fire warming her face. She looked at the armor lying beside his shelter, still untouched, still silent. I used to think that armor made you strong, she said. But it was never the metal. Riven didn't speak. You were strong because you cared, she added. Even when I didn't, a small child's voice called from beyond the ruins. Guardian. Riven stood quickly and walked toward the sound. Zaya followed, curious. They found a small alien boy with a torn pack and a bruised knee. Without a word, Riven picked him up and carried him back to the fire. He cleaned the wound, wrapped the leg, and gave the boy food. The child looked up at Zaya, then whispered, Are you his mate? Zaya froze, her face turning red. Riven said nothing, only handed the boy a blanket. No, Zaya said after a long pause, but I want to be someone worthy of standing beside him. The boy didn't understand, but Riven did. He looked at her across the fire, the old light in his eyes flickering, soft, unsure but not closed, and in that silent moment, something small shifted, not forgiveness, not love, not yet, but a beginning. The wind had changed. Riven felt it in his bones as he stood at the edge of the ruins, watching the red horizon grow darker than usual. Storms were normal here, but this was no ordinary storm. There was something wrong in the air, too quiet, too still. Zaya stood behind him, wrapping her cloak tighter, her eyes scanning the hills. What is it? She asked, her voice low. Raiders, Riven said calmly a moment later. The scream of an engine echoed through the rocks. Then another and another. 3 dust bikes shot over the hills, followed by a battle cart made from scrap metal and smoke. Children hiding nearby began to cry, and the elders moved slowly to pull them into shelters made from stone and wire. Riven didn't move, his eyes locked on the incoming vehicles. Zaya stepped forward. We have to run. There's no time, he said. She looked at him, heart racing. Then fight them. Like you used to. He looked down at his hands, rough and tired. Then over at the old armor lying beside the fire. It hadn't been touched since he walked away from the palace now. It waited like an old friend. Like a memory begging to rise again. The engines roared closer. The dust cloud rising higher. Children screamed, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Zaya turned to him again, this time not as a queen, but as someone afraid to lose what she had just found. Please, she whispered, they'll kill everyone. Riven looked at her, then at the villagers, their wide eyes, their trembling hands, their trust. He stepped toward the armor, knelt slowly and picked up the helmet. Dust fell from it like ash. The old metal still held dents. Scars bled from battles long gone one by one. He placed each piece back onto his body. Chest plate, arms, shoulders, legs. It didn't shine like the Royal Guard's armor. It was dull, cracked, weathered, but it fit. And when he stood, the earth seemed to recognize him. The silent guardian had become a warrior again. Zaya stared, her breath caught in her chest. He looked like a statue from legend, risen from ashes, but there was no pride in his movements, only purpose. The raiders arrived in a wave of noise and smoke, weapons in hand, shouting threats. They fired into the sky, laughing, expecting an easy conquest. Until they saw him, one of them paused, eyes wide. Is that? Before he could finish, Riven moved, not with rage, but with speed and precision. He moved like a storm, quiet at first, then impossible to stop. He knocked the first raider off his bike with a single blow, sending the machine crashing into a wall. He grabbed another by the arm and threw him into the dust like a doll. The others tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't break his armor. He didn't use a gun, only a staff made from old metal. And his fists, Zaya watched in awe, her heart thundering. This was the man she once mocked. This was the heart she once called weak. And now he stood between death and innocence. Without a single word, the battle lasted minutes, but it felt like hours when the dust cleared. The raiders were either unconscious, captured, or fleeing into the hills. The villagers came out slowly, whispering his name. Guardian, Protector, Riven. He didn't turn to them, didn't celebrate. He simply walked back to the fire. The armor still heavy on his body, Zaya followed. Her eyes filled with something new, respect, but also shame. You could have left, she said quietly. Let them suffer, let me suffer. He sat by the fire, removing the helmet, sweat dripping down his neck. I fight for them, he said, nodding toward the villagers. Not for you. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. I know. The children ran toward him. Hugging his legs, laughing, one gave him a small flower. Blue and glowing softly, he took it without a word, placing it beside the pendant she had left earlier. That night Zaya sat near him, but not close. She didn't speak, didn't cry, she simply watched the fire, knowing that even if he never forgave her, she would stay. Because even broken hearts can still protect, and even shattered warriors can still rise. Morning came slowly to the ruins, the sky glowed soft orange, and a quiet breeze touched the broken stones like a gentle hand. Riven sat by the fire, sharpening an old blade. Not for battle, but for memory. Zaya stood nearby, watching him in silence, her heart full of words but unsure where to begin. She had seen him fight like a god, defend like a shield, and speak like a man who had nothing left to lose, and yet he stayed not for her, but for the people, for the weak, for those without armor. She held the small pendant in her palm, the silver star she had brought, a gift once meant for a man she hadn't truly seen. Now she saw him clearer than ever, and the truth was hard, she didn't deserve him. Not yet, maybe not ever, but she couldn't leave without trying. Riven stood and turned to her, his face calm, unreadable as always. You're leaving, he said. Not as a question, but as a quiet fact. I should, she replied, but not before giving you one last thing. She reached into her bag and pulled out her crown. It shimmered in the morning light. Golden crystal, the symbol of her power, her pride, her mistake. I ruled with this, she said. But I never understood what ruling meant. Riven didn't speak. His eyes steady. I mocked your heart, she continued, her voice shaking. But now I know. It was the strongest thing I've ever seen. She knelt before him, slow and honest, and placed the crown on the ground between them. I don't need it, she whispered. Not if it means standing above people like you. For a long time, there was only silence. Then Riven bent down and picked up the crown. He looked at it, then at her, then turned and placed it gently beside the fire. You don't need to kneel, he said. Not here. Zaya rose, tears in her eyes, but no weakness in her spine. I hurt you, she said, and I'll carry that forever. Riven walked past her toward the edge of the ruins. She followed him, heart pounding. They stood side by side, looking at the distant hills where the village slept. Peaceful for now, the people need you, he said. They always did. They need us, she replied, together, not as queen and soldier, but as two who finally understand. He turned to her, the wind moving through his hair. I'm tired, he said, not of war, but of waiting for someone to see me. I see you now, she said, stepping closer. Not as a weapon, not as a hero, just as Riven. His name and her voice felt different now, softer, real. She reached for his hand, not forcefully, just open, waiting. For a moment he looked down at it, unsure, but then, slowly, he took it. Fingers curled around fingers, warm and honest. No armor, no crown, no thrones between them. Just two people who had finally reached the end of silence. They stood like that until the sun rose fully, casting golden light across the ruins. In the distance, children ran through the rocks, laughing, unaware that peace had just been reborn, not by armies, not by treaties, but by the choice of two hearts. Later that day, Riven removed his armor again, not because he was broken, but because he didn't need it anymore. He hung it beside his home, now polished and clean. Not forgotten, just resting, Zaya stayed in the village. Not as a ruler, but as a student, A helper, a listener. She cleaned wounds, carried water, learned how to speak softly, and every night, she and Riven sat by the fire, watching the stars rise like tiny hopes in the sky. No one called her Your Highness anymore. They called her Zaya, and she smiled every time. One evening, as the villagers danced to old songs, she leaned close to Riven and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on the world. Even when you gave up on me," he didn't answer right away. Just looked at her with quiet strength, then he said, "You helped me remember who I was." And for the first time he smiled. Not the smile of a soldier, but of a man at peace. The fire burned gently. The crown stayed untouched beside the hearth, and the armor stood quiet under the stars. No longer needed but never forgotten, and so, the warrior who walked away returned without noise, without orders, without pride, only heart, the kind that never needed to be proven again.